My name is Scott Morris. I graduated from the college in 1986, degree in economics, and got my MBA in the night program in 1992. My background is in quantitative models, building, and trading. I've worked at some small firms here in Chicago. I worked at Goldman Sachs. I worked at one of the exchanges, and now I'm on my own doing consulting work.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Fortner. I graduated from the college in 1998, and I actually was a psychology major. So for those of you who are not econ majors, there are actually careers in business for you as well. And during the summers of school, I actually had an internship where I traded futures and options. I remember thinking back and thinking that, you know, I didn't want to do business in high school. And then I had this opportunity over an internship to really learn about the business world and fell in love with it. And so in '98, I graduated and started at Goldman Sachs in the private wealth management area, which is helping high net worth individuals think through asset allocation and investments. And I fell in love with it. I did a 3-year financial analyst role, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about. And they asked me to stay on, and so I've actually been there for the last 11 years now in the same role. And I also have 3 children. I have a 5-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a new 8-month-old. So you can do it all. We'll talk about that hopefully later, but I think it's just important to mention that as well.
Jacob. Thanks. Jacob Hart. I graduated from the college in '02 and studied history and Near Eastern language and civilizations. Not your typical asset manager background, but then also did a master's with the Center for Middle East Studies, which I finished in '04. And I came to the field of finance with a different route. I actually was focusing more on the particular market. I was working in the Middle East and Central Asia, and doing language, and got involved with Save the Children, working in the field in Azerbaijan, and they put me with their microfinance institution. So we were actually doing banking, but to the poor, funded by the U.S. government, and got involved with the commercialization of that sector, which led to my working with a small firm in New York, which actually invests commercially in those types of institutions. So it's an emerging market asset manager, but you know, my path definitely was a little bit different for those of you who are interested in finance and interested in business, but might not have focused on that in your studies.
My name is Linda Choi, and I've probably taken the most circuitous path to where I am today. I went to the Booth Business School, and normally I know that the panelists are expected to have a college degree from the U of C as well, but I think they made an exception for me because I worked at CAPS before, so I appreciate the exception for the rule. So before business school, I started my career in venture capital in Asia, so working for a VC firm that was started by the Ministry of Finance in Korea. And then I came back to the States to get my MBA, and then I actually was doing consulting at Accenture for a while, and then I went to an internet startup when everyone went to an internet startup, and that wasn't such a great idea. And then I ended up working at the University of Chicago, doing a lot of different things. I ran the college programming office at one point, CAPS at another point, Office of Minority Affairs, and so doing a variety of things. And now I am the Chief Operations Officer at a hedge fund in Chicago. So I think the main point that I want to make today is that you can always reinvent yourself, and there are many ways to get from point A to point B.
I'll just pick up on that. My name is Paul Ellenbogen. I graduated from college in 1986 with a degree in political science. Didn't quite know what to do with myself. Entered a 10-year detour into the academic world, received a doctorate, taught at the college level for 3 years, and then backed into a position at Morningstar, which was basically a writing analysis position, which is how I was able to get it without much of a background in finance. Fortunately, the firm was run by a person who was a U of C liberal arts graduate and indeed named the company after a line from Thoreau's Walden. So, as we say in Yiddish, you should all be so lucky whatever your skills to find a position, but there are certain non-traditional ways to get into the financial world.
Okay, thank you. As you can see, we've got a nice, very diverse panel here. So one program correction that Keith Dipple wanted me to mention, that I guess there's an issue accessing the Alumni Career Network, but he will be sending out on the financial services list host how to get on there. So, all right, let's get to it. And I think probably where we should start is, because there has been a lot of turmoil in the financial markets lately, and I would imagine that some of you might have a question in your mind as far as whether the financial services is really a good place to go. So let's start out there, and I'll just kick it out, and whoever wants to start off, please do. What do you guys think about financial services, the future of financial services 5-10 years from now?
I can kick things off. So I work on the private side of the business. At Goldman Sachs, we work with both institutions and individuals. And I think one of the great things about the financial services sector is that there will always be a need for really smart people to think about finances and investing. I can look at it from the perspective of what I do with our clients, and I know that in the investment management division at Goldman that we're very much hiring there and hiring in investment banking, and I think the outlook is actually quite good because we did go through this downturn, but things are looking up. We definitely have a long way to come out of where we started, but I think one of the things that a lot of the firms realize is that they really need very good advice. I know our clients are looking for advice and thinking through things in a different way, and one of the things that we look at is risk. And so I think more so than ever, people really are looking at their balance sheets, firms are looking at their balance sheets in a different way and trying to manage that risk. And so I think the outlook is actually quite good. Usually in 2001, when after 9/11, I was in New York in one of our training programs, and it was basically when I was pretty much starting the business, coming out of the analyst program, and everyone said, well, this is the best time to be starting your business. And I remember thinking to myself, are they crazy? Do they not know that the market is completely gone down and things are so tough? But looking back, they're absolutely right, because once you get through a downturn, it is cyclical, and people really are looking to finally to make a move. And I think for the first time this year, I'd be interested in what the rest of the panel think. I see people less deer in headlights and frozen and actually ready to do some things, and quite excited about 2010 and beyond.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, just to pick up on that, I mean, there's a cliche in business, but every crisis creates an opportunity. Morningstar just entered the credit rating business, which has been a kind of triopoly for many years, but people were supposed to be independently and objectively rating bonds, in fact, were in bed with the people whose bonds they were supposed to be rating, and that's one of the factors that led us to our present condition. So that is not good if you happen to be one of those firms, but does create opportunities for other people who are going to come along and say that people do need independent, objective analysis of fixed income securities, and if some people have kind of abandoned that field or compromised themselves, well, there's still a need and someone else will fill it. So I too see a pickup in business, even in entering into new businesses, because some of the major players have been thoroughly discredited because they're not bankrupt.
Yeah, no, I think that's both those comments make a lot of sense, and I think, that not only the credit rating agencies being hurt, but then also I think people are, in response to looking for perhaps being more sensitive to decreasing risk, thinking about other opportunities which are out there beyond, say, the traditional opportunities. So, for example, emerging market investment, I think it's picking up quite a lot for those of you who are interested in international business as well.
From our perspective, so we run an international small cap fund, and most of our clients are high net worth individuals and family offices. And we were really lucky that our clients are incredibly loyal. So in 2008, we didn't lose a lot of our clients. But what we are seeing, though, with what has happened is an increased interest in compliance. And so one of the things that we are preparing to do is to register with the SEC. So the expectations of even hedge funds who haven't been really regulated by the SEC, I think moving forward that's something that a lot of clients will expect to see more and more of.
So I guess the general consensus is that it's still a good time to be in the financial markets. Any kind of, asset prices are so low right now that soon we'll enter the merger stage where people will be taking advantage of those low prices. That should really start the boom in the investment banking area, which will carry on further. There are risks, though, and maybe we should just think about that, and I'll pose that to you guys. What could go wrong? What could make that rosy outlook turn more dire?
Well,
Go ahead.
well, for us, we invest, like I said, in international small cap, so micro cap to mid cap, meaning a lot of these stocks, the median market cap, we're at about 600 million. So we're talking about tiny companies where they've been undiscovered and that there's very little research on, and we invest in those thinking that we'll stay in those positions for 3 to 5 years. And I guess a worst case scenario could be that we haven't made the right judgment in terms of which stocks to pick, and all of those stocks could fail miserably. So I think that could be a terrible situation for us.
At risk for you is most of the financial services industry is very much dependent. Revenues are pretty clearly tied to assets. So you may be perfectly competent and capable when you go out in the working world, but if a firm's assets are down 40%, then their revenues are down 40%, and their hiring is probably going to be down at least as much. So in a sense, you're at the whim of the market regardless of your abilities. So that is a problem with financial services that I don't think anybody's found a way to overcome.
Yeah, no, I would really agree with that, and that there's a lot of uncertainty still. I mean, the 2009 turned out to be a very good year in terms of recovery for most sectors, but it's not clear yet which way things are going, and so there should be opportunities, but I think a number of firms have been more reluctant to hire immediately because they're not exactly sure what's going to happen. If there is going to be more hard times and a bit more trouble before things pick up again, or if we are actually on the road to recovery completely.
Yeah, I think I would agree. The market, March 9th was the low of the market, and the S&P was at 666. And right now, the S&P is above 1,100. So we're up 70% from the lows in a very short amount of time. And so that's all based on this vision that things are getting better. And so I think the biggest risk is if unemployment over time, right now unemployment is kind of, it's kind of stabilizing, which is a good thing. But if we were to see that spike a little bit, or things, it's getting less worse. So if you were to, see something, and that's been a positive, and so the market's always forward-looking. And so if you were to see some type of negative news that were to come in, and I think because the market has gone up so quickly, it might be a little bit more reactive to that in a negative way, and so that's just something to be watching out for. But as far as sitting in your seats, if I was, I think most of you are second and third years, correct? If I was sitting in your seat, I think I'd be feeling optimistic and good, because you're going to be out in the market a couple years from now, and I think things will hopefully be stabilizing by then. I think one thing that we're all kind of watching closely, and there's not a lot, unfortunately, I don't think we in our seats can do about it, but, you know, the deficit that we have right now is pretty huge. And the dollar has been pretty weak. And so, you know, these are longer term things. I know that we're spinning our heads thinking about, we're not too worried about inflation, but down the line, that's something, you know, that just people should be cognizant of, and hopefully some really genius people in this room can solve some of those problems for us in a few years when they're out. So keep studying economics when you, let us know what you think when you get out.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think a lot of the risks are sort of political related. Wall Street is considered kind of the evil stepchild right now in the world. So that probably will not ripple into some drastic measure in the political front, but that could certainly hurt the industry for a long period of time if there was a transaction tax, or if there were sort of caps on bonuses and things like that were instituted into law. That could definitely hurt the industry. We're gonna sort of shift gears a little bit here and start talking about kind of how the things that we kind of look for in people like you in our firms. But before I do that, I just wanted to see if there's any questions from you about the industry and about some of the things that we've said so far. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'd like to know, this is a question for you. Out of the companies that you work for, would you say like some of the most meaningful things you've seen accomplished?
The firms accomplish?
Yeah.
Or
in particular things
okay, that is something we're gonna talk about, kind of like our experiences in our firms. I wanted to see if there are any general questions about the financial markets that we've talked about. Remind me and make sure that we answer that. So, any questions regarding that? Okay, what was your? Okay, go ahead.
It seems that the hiring of interns and new employees is kind of cyclic with the market. Do you see a rebound in that in your future?
That's a good question. You want to take that, Jennifer?
We're definitely seeing that. So I actually captain recruiting for University of Chicago. I'm always trying to get my UFC people at Goldman. So you definitely have me in your camp. But I did that for the last 9 years. And this was the first year I actually was asked to do the Chicago booth. So, but I still am working for my undergrads. So don't ever feel like that's out. That's still front and center for me. So, but on that front, I'd say we are very much hiring right now, especially in investment management and especially in investment banking. And again, the markets are forward-looking, and you'll find that the investment banks are forward-looking. So we're seeing, okay, you know, if things were down, where are we going to be in a couple years? And if we want to be, you know, top of the pack in a couple years, we got to be hiring now. So we are definitely seeing that already occur. I don't
and you
know
can
about,
just drop your resume right off in front.
Are you guys seeing the same
Our last
thing?
intern is somebody on a panel this afternoon by the name of Brandon Arnold, and when he graduated in June, we're not able to replace him as we had kind of every year previously. It's something of a symbolic measure. I mean, a company's profitability really doesn't depend on whether they hire an intern or not, but that's the kind of thing companies cut in a tough time, just to make it look like they're, you know, cutting every possible corner or every possible dollar. But I expect come June we should be hiring more interns, and you know, things have kind of loosened up. We had a hiring freeze. It's off now. We have about 45 jobs after having no official jobs out there for a good year.
We're much smaller, so we don't have a formal internship program. We have 2 portfolio managers and 3 analysts, and it's myself. The good news is one of the analysts is a U of C alum, and he used to work with me at the U of C in the college programming office. So I'd like to say I helped him a little bit to get his job. And then, so I guess just to point out the importance of the relationships that you build in college, I think are really important to keep in mind. And then I also have a U of C student who's doing an unpaid externship with us right now. He just reached out to me, and I love the idea of working with college students. And so Unfortunately, not everyone has the ability to do an unpaid type of work option, but for this student, he does, and I have to say it's been working out great. So I guess I just want you to be creative about how you get some experience while you're in college, and that would be one way of doing it too.
Yeah, similar to Linda, we're very small. We only have 8 people in our organization. Half of them are U of C alums, so I wouldn't say we have a bias, but you could just have yourself. That said, I think that's right. I mean, to the extent that we take an extern every year, and we certainly are open to internships. But I think there are a lot of opportunities out there for internships, particularly if you're interested in emerging market investment, to go out into the field or and actually work with some of the businesses that you might be funding, and thinking about internships from different angles. Not necessarily if you want to be the investor, you can look at institutions that do that investment, but you can also think about what kind of companies you're investing in and try to work for those companies as well, because it's very valuable to have that experience when you're working on the other side.
Right, I think that's really good advice. Just do something. If you don't get a internship with a prestigious investment bank, don't worry about it. Just do something. What they will be looking for when you graduate are the skills that you've been able to accomplish, okay, and the experience that you've been able to gain. So it doesn't have to be at an investment bank to learn how to value a company or to understand how a deal works. You can do that in a research environment. You can do that in a lot of different ways. So just to find a way to get the skills, even if you don't get paid for it. That's my advice to you. Okay, thank you. Where should we go next? Let's talk a little bit about some specifics about what we look for when we're interviewing, when we're hiring recent graduates from college. What are let's start with the positives first. What are the things, the 3 or 4 things that really make people stand out? Who wants to start? We'll start. Paul, you want to start?
Yeah, one of the standard questions we ask people is about their own investing experience, and a lot of people will say, well, I'm a college student, I don't have a lot of money. What I'll point out here, in case you get in that position, is there's a lot of ways to have a paper portfolio. You can trade stocks or bonds or options without using real dollars, and to go into an interview and say, well, this is what I bought, or this is how I watch the markets, or this is the kind of investor I admire, or the kind of investor I'd like to be, that's going to carry you a lot further than saying, well, gee, I like investing, I've always liked the stock market, it's really interesting. And to say, I bought this company, or I pretended to buy this company because I'm in college and I'm eating ramen noodles, but I would have bought this company, and I watched it, and I looked at the valuations this way, and I thought about their market that way. That's very compelling. So if you're not doing that, just invest or pretend to invest and have that to talk about.
So Scott, you want me to mention 4 things? I can only think of 2 right now, so I'm going to start with 2. I mean, you only did 1. Okay.
But between all of us.
Okay, we can come up with 4. Okay. Well, I think the fact that you guys are at U of C means that you're all smart. So we don't even have to talk about that. So you all have the intellectual capacity, let's say. I think when it comes down to who we want to hire, I would say it's someone, as Paul mentioned, someone who has shown some interest. And again, it could be in a lot of different ways, but that's why we all talked about why it's important that you have some kind of experience to show that you've been creative, or you found some opportunity to gain some experience. So I think demonstrating that you have an interest, as Paul said, is really key. And then I think personally, I want someone who has a really strong work ethic. And I know everyone thinks, oh, well, of course I have a strong work ethic. But I've seen so many times where I work with a college grad who thinks that filing is beneath them. Right. And you know what? We all have to do it. And so just get over it. So you're going to be the new person, and you're going to have to do pretty much go above and beyond what you should do in your job description. So I would just expect to do that. So it's not, you can't say, well, I graduated from the U of C, so I can't file. So that's just, strong work ethic, I think, is key. And then, tied to that is just being really adaptable and flexible. So again, not saying, well, this is what I need to do as an analyst or, whatever different role that you have, but to be able to show that you can adapt and be flexible to whatever your supervisor, boss, manager may ask you to do. So I would say those are the two things that I have in mind.
2? I counted 4.
Did I get to 4? Okay.
I think, out-of-the-box thinking, I think, would be one of the major things that one looks for when they're interviewing, and that's, I liked what David Medina said in his keynote, where he said, you should really follow your passions, irrespective of what you're doing, and that's important. It's important to really love what it is that you are doing, and whether that is, focusing on certain types of investing, whether that's looking at a certain region or topic, whatever it is, and to use the skills at the U of C, just the way that you can think about things critically, even if it's not necessarily directly correlated to the specific position that you're applying for, but that's the most valuable skill set, to question the information, to look at something with an approach that perhaps is different from the way that others are thinking and that you're told you should think about it. Those types of skills are very important. And then the other one I would say is language. This world is becoming closer and closer through globalization, and Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, those are very valuable going forward. And I see more and more positions that require a language, and people that come in with a language and with knowledge of a country having a significant advantage.
If you could just give an example of what you mean by out-of-the-box thinking, maybe personal example or someone that came across that.
Sure. I think, for example, I was talking with someone who was looking for a trader position, and it was not something that fit within our organization, but we were talking generally about how to approach the issue of currency management, where you have your fund denominated in, say, dollars, but you're investing in another type of currency. And there's certain instruments that the person could use, but there are also development banks that were creating specific currency instruments to help hedge that exposure. And the person had the idea to actually approach these development banks, which were focused more on poverty alleviation and policy, and try to get them to work in the realm of currency hedges, which is not something they had done previously. And the development banks actually were interested and had created a facility to do that. So I think in that specific example, a person had gone to a party that had not been involved in the field and said, hey, you have a policy interest in this. Can we get you involved to help create a tool which we can then use?
Right.
And actually, it was something the development banks had done.
Right. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Go ahead,
And
Jen.
I completely agree with the rest of the panelists, and I think all those are really important aspects. And I guess the only two areas I would add, which have a little bit been touched on, is, as Linda had mentioned, all of you are incredibly smart, and so that's a given. But I think what really differentiates a lot of students we look at are, we like to hire people who have a lot of extracurriculars on their resumes, because if you're sitting next to someone every day, you want to make sure it's someone who's well-rounded and that you can have a dialogue with and bounce ideas back and forth on. And so I think it's really important to obviously do well in your academics and to study hard, but part of college is about experience, as we had touched a lot on. And so the more clubs that you can get involved with, or getting into the city, or doing things, I know there's a study abroad program, all of those things I think really add to things that you can talk about in an interview, things that you can talk about when you're sitting next to someone, and it's critically important. And I think one other thing I just would like to mention is leadership is also something we look at, but also being a team player. So that any type of teams that you're involved with, I'd really, that doesn't have to be sports, but any type of team involvement that you have. And then I guess my fourth one would just be, when interviewing is something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to everyone, and I would just like to put a quick plug in here for CAPS. CAPS is an amazing organization that they had on campus, and since I've been there, it's even developed more and more. And the students that we interview that have spent time with CAPS and doing those mock interviews and in all the different services, Linda could talk more of this than I can, I really see a difference. And I'm sure some of you are in the Chicago careers in business. All those things are really phenomenal. And I just see a huge difference in students who come in practicing those things. You wouldn't necessarily intuitively think about it. But to spend a few minutes doing some mock interviews, I think would be really helpful because it's not intuitive all the time.
Great. Well, thank you. I have 10 things. I'll go over my list and compare notes. I've got intellectual capacity, interest in the field. I think that's a key one. Have something that you've done that makes it easier for us to know, okay, this person actually is interested in working in my firm because I have some experience that they've done that. Strong work ethic, doing the little things well. I think this is really important too. So I always tell people in past organizations that were new that they needed to show me that they could do the little things well before they would gain my confidence that I would give them a big thing to do. So it's important to be able to do the filing, all those things. Everything is important. Okay, that was 3, right? Adaptability, out-of-the-box thinking, language skills. I kind of summarize yours as multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to, a lot of extracurriculars, show that you are well-rounded. So I think those are kind of well-roundedness, that's a word. Leadership and experience and skills and team skills. Okay, those were my 10. One is missing, I thought was important, that's competition. Competitive people in certain roles is very, very important. Team sports is one way. There's a lot of other ways besides sports to show that that you're competitive and you can perform well under pressure. So a lot of roles in finance, you need to do that as well. Did we leave anything out? It's 11. You guys think of anything else? So I know your resumes are getting longer now. Keep that font size at 11 or so. Did we leave anything else? Anybody else have anything? Okay, awesome, very good. I'm going to ask at this time if there are any questions. I'm going to let this gentleman go and ask his question if you'd like right now.
Yeah, that's what I asked for.
Which restate it again, please.
We're old.
Out of the firms you work at and particular things that you working towards, what are some of the most meaningful accomplishments that you did or that you saw the
Okay, most meaningful. The question is, what were some of the most meaningful accomplishments that you or your firm did in your past history? Does anybody want to start off?
Well, we've just gone through this because we hit our 25th anniversary, so everybody's getting the kind of corporate story. But Joe Mansueto started with an intellectual interest. He was a UC undergraduate, and he thought he would ask questions. But I think the boldest thing he did was to presume something that at the time seems commonplace, namely that people who manage money should be accountable to the people for whom they manage the money, and that their work should be rated, and it should be commented upon, and it should be evaluated relative to other people doing the same work. And that assumption at the time, I mean, he was a punk for saying it, and he would call investment managers, and they would say, I don't have to tell you what my returns are. We're seeing a little bit of this, forgive me, now in the hedge fund world, where for many years the hedge fund world operated this way. I don't tell you what I do what I do, and if you like it, give me $1 million, and if you don't, go away, I've got someone else in line. And he kind of spoke boldly and said, well, you know, if you're managing someone else's money, you should be answerable to those people, and you should be accountable, and you should be able to explain what you do and why, and admit when you've made a mistake, and submit to being judged and evaluated and rated. Again, seems obvious, but it's one of those lessons that gets learned, I think, recurrently and forgotten and relearned. But you can build a business on it.
Anybody else? You don't have to answer.
Sure. I
by the
mean,
way.
for us, I think, you know, when you're working in finance, you're typically several steps away from perhaps the user of the capital. But for us, what we do is we invest in banks that specialize in lending to the poor. And we do it on a purely financial basis. It's not a social business. But the most meaningful part is always going out in the field and visiting the people who are ultimately getting the money and then using it and seeing what it does, you know, for their own lives. And I think, for example, credit and other types of investment are very important tools that we need as a society. And it's so in my particular case, I remember going out in Peru and going up to the mountains to an indigenous community that actually had received these loans, and there was small traders that had a shop, and they had, you know, I mean, we deal in much larger sums from pension funds, university endowments, et cetera, but that money all goes down in smaller increments. And so I visited someone who had received a $200 loan and had used the money to buy stock for their store and had increased their business and hired someone, and you could see the economic livelihood that helped create. And I think that also can be meaningful when you do see the people who are getting the proceeds of you know, the financial instruments that you're dealing with.
And I would just like to say, I think along those lines, for me, the most meaningful thing, I think I had mentioned earlier, when I was in high school, I actually said I would never do business, and the reason, and it was, I guess, silly, but in my mind, I thought that only kind of evil people or just really, you know, self-absorbed people want to do business, and that was just my perception, and so I wanted to do psychology and do something that could really help people. And then when I had this experience over the summers of school, I realized that there were actually very good people in business, and that the world needs good people in business who want to do the right thing and who want to help people. And so for me, I have always wanted to kind of align that helping people with what do I do every day, and I really wanted to be at a firm that did that. And I think it's particularly important now because of all the things that Scott, you had said earlier, you know, like the evil Wall Street. And I just want the group to know that that you can do good and be in business. And one of the things that I guess I'm most proud of and is so meaningful is from a firm perspective, we started something called 10,000 Women a year and a half ago, and I was one of the first mentors for that, where we gave X amount of money over 5 years to help educate 10,000 women in business and entrepreneurship in the most underserved countries around the world. And we just announced something else where we're going to do 10,000 small businesses, where we're going to go into urban communities and help over the next 5 years fund really, again, underserved communities in the U.S. to help start businesses. And from a personal perspective, being able to mentor a woman online in Nigeria with her business was really incredible and moving to me. And it kind of aligned all these interests, and I realized that you could do good and be in business. And I'll just say one of my thoughts initially out of undergrad really quickly was, should I do nonprofit first or should I do business first? Because ultimately I want to do something in the nonprofit world. And what I decided was to do business first and then ultimately do nonprofit down the line from here. And what I realized is by being at Goldman Sachs or a firm like it, I was able to get on some nonprofit boards that I wouldn't have been able to at age 23 or 24. So on the board of Special Olympics, I've been doing that for 10 years, you know, on the board of some other organizations. And I realized that this business thing can help me change the world in a better way. And I didn't know that that was possible when I was sitting in your seats. And so I want you guys to know that you can do good and be in the business world. And we really need people who can do that, I think, more than ever.
Good. Common thread that I got from all of that is there's always an underlying passion involved. Whenever we're talking about success, there's this underlying passion that either through Morningstar or Jacob, you can feel that Jacob has passion for what he's doing. He feels that not only is he making a good living, but he's doing something that hits his passions. I think that really comes through. And I think that's one of a key takeaway from that, that if you can find a job or a career that aligns are aligned with your passions, that you have a higher probability of turning that into a successful career. Okay, I think there was I didn't realize they let freshmen in here. So, but go ahead, you can ask your question anyway. So.
Runs international programs at University of Chicago. Hello, I am very grateful for the panel. I have a diverse international experience. I have a question of a different sort, though, and Scott in particular may be able to address this. There's a real range of types of organizations you work for, both in size and startup notions. Would you care to comment, any panelist, on the advantages or disadvantages of having your own shop, working for a medium-sized firm, working for a large firm?
Very good question. Who would like to
I
start
could
off there?
maybe kick off just talking about working in a small firm. I mean, I think the advantages of working in a small firm is that are that you do get a breadth of experience, and that's something that you can take many different roles because you need to be a real self-starter. And I think part of it is thinking about your own nature and the type of environment that you thrive in. Certain people prefer to have a little bit more in the way of security and structure, and people directly supervising them. And I think others like to go out and forge their own path. And for a small startup organization, I think that desire to go out and look at everything with a fresh perspective and take on a number of different roles, some of which you will not be successful at and others which you will, is very valuable. And I think though there are distinct disadvantages to that, which a large organization has, and perhaps you could speak more about that, where you do have that structure and you do have a mentorship in a different type of way.
No, I think that's right. I think in a large organization, I think one of the things that I learned in investment banking is there is kind of a different role for everyone. And I always thought investment banking, when I was sitting in your seats, was just the spreadsheet number crunching, and that's not what I do. And so there's a lot of different roles, and the part that I'm in is actually very entrepreneurial. So it's like having your own business in private wealth, but with all the support of a large firm. And so I think the answer for a large firm is finding the group or the division that meets your needs. And you could find something that is entrepreneurial, maybe not quite as much, but pretty far down that path on the left side. But you could also find something that's very much in a big way. And I think you're right. It just is a matter of feeling that out. And so I think sitting in a seat and getting that experience or talking to alums is probably the best way to do that, because I think there's something for everyone. Would you guys agree with that?
I guess there's a temptation to use size as a proxy for entrepreneurial spirit, but having worked at a smaller firm that was a family firm, that can be very limiting if you're not part of the family, regardless of the size. And I now work for would be considered, I guess, a mid-sized firm, but if the corporate culture is right, it can be very entrepreneurial. So we don't have a lot of layers. Literally, no one has an office at Morningstar, including the CEO and the C-level people. And if you were there as an intern, you'd sit at exactly the same kind of desk as I do. And that's symbolic in a way, but it also tells you about the culture of the place, which is that anybody with a good idea can bring it forward. And if you're at a place that isn't obsessed about titles and ranks and hierarchies and priorities, a kind of more informal, open culture, that can be entrepreneurial even if you have 2,500 employees. And the reverse is also true. You can be at a smaller place, in my experience, which is very limiting just because you get slapped down for having an idea. So I'd go by culture more than size.
And just to add to that, having been at both, at big corporations like Accenture and then now being at a really small firm, I would say that I would never take back the experience I did have a big firm because of the structure and training that I did receive. I think when I needed it at that age, now I think I have a much better idea of how I best operate or perform. And so I think sometimes it's good to try out both and see in what environment am I most motivated to do a good job. And then Paul talked about working with family, and I should share this, that I currently work with my family at this hedge fund. The hedge fund.
Your family's fine.
Yeah, it's my family, so it's fine, right? So the hedge fund is run by my brother-in-law, and what makes this more interesting is that we share space with my sister, who is a U of C grad, who runs her law firm in the same office suite. And then my father has retired and runs the books for my sister's law firm. So I've only been at my job for 3 months, and we haven't all killed each other yet. So we're waiting to do that at some point. But I have to say, it's so great in so many ways and so bad. It's great because I get to spend time with my family, which I really value now. I don't think I would have valued it at your age. And now, but it's a lot of pressure too. I never imagined that there's the pressure to do a really good job, because now you're talking about your family's future, I guess. So it's good and bad. So I just wanted to share that perspective too.
Okay, so a lot of good things here. So let me summarize. This is a really good question, because this is very important for all of you. A lot of people are sort of drawn to the marquee names like Goldman Sachs and so forth, and it is a great firm, but there are advantages to being a large firm like that. The structure, the training program really comes out. There's a lot of good mentors there. You can learn a lot from other people there. A really important point that came up, that size isn't necessarily related to how entrepreneurial a firm can be, that there are ways that firms have found out through their culture to kind of create the pocket small teams within the organization to make it. I will say large firms can be political. There's no question about it. In order to get things done in a larger firm, there's more people that have to be involved, especially if a large firm says that they have a flat organization, or they don't have a sort of like a strict hierarchy. Well, what that means is there's certain people in there that carry the power, and you have to find out who those people are, and the power sort of goes down through them. So be leery if a large firm says they have a flat organization, because they don't. That just means they don't have titles, they have people, and those actually can be very, very hard to work in if you don't fit perfectly with the culture. And I think someone brought up the part of culture, which is really important. Every firm has its own culture. You wouldn't think about it. Every university has its own culture. So when you did your search, your college search, right? You'd go and you'd learn about it. It's like, oh, that's different from this one, and so forth. Every firm is the same way. You have to find the culture that fits your own personality. And if you don't like, I think Morningstar is great. They don't have offices. That says a big thing about their culture. Okay. It's an open environment. A lot of people thrive in that environment. A lot of people don't. So it's a matter of finding those. Small firms, you really can get a larger breadth of experience at a smaller firm. So if something needs to get done, okay, you don't have the same support. You got to learn how to get it done. So a lot of people thrive in that environment. A lot of people don't. A lot of people need more structure. You can be a self-starter, I think, at both. One interesting thing, and so you have an opportunity to advance faster in a smaller firm, okay? Simply because there's not as many other specialization going on. So your career path can be somewhat circuitous. But again, there might not be as many opportunities to go and do something completely new that a big firm like Goldman Sachs. You could maybe transfer divisions. You could find a better fit that way. I think that covers it. Okay, very good question. Any more questions? We'll go there and then you. Okay.
What sort of career opportunities are there for people who have a very strong math background? And would either a master's or an MBA come in handy in those careers?
Okay. Anybody want to? Anybody have a strong math background?
I can't speak to that. I mean, there are people who.
I'll talk about this because
I've probably better than
I would say in a trading environment, certainly, and actuarial fields, very, very important situation. Portfolio management, yeah, any kind of any kind of sort of quantitative methods, equity research maybe as well. So Emanuel Derman wrote a very, very important paper. Emanuel Derman he's got a model named after him, actually two, but I don't remember the name of them right now, but anyway, finance models, that's a big thing. But anyway, he wrote a paper about his transition from academia to finance, and I think it was something like his first day, I think it was at Goldman Sachs, right? Yeah, he was. Someone said, okay, here we use addition, subtraction, and sometimes multiplication and division. So they keep it simple, is the point. So there are opportunities to use your math skills, but you have to be able to translate those in a way that non-math people can understand it. So that would be an important skill. As far as your education, I would kind of wait and see what opportunities really fit you as far as how you're using that skill. You might find that there's an opportunity in, say, evaluating fixed income securities or something like that, where and you're in a firm that might value an MBA with your leadership experience. I got an MBA. I'm a big fan of an MBA for a different reason than perhaps, because I was like you, I was sort of like a quant. I wanted to learn about quant stuff, and that was the best way to do it way back when. But what I found out was what I was using as my career grew was the other stuff, the stuff I really didn't want to take, the marketing, the strategy, all that other stuff. So getting a liberal arts education is great because it makes you well-rounded. An MBA makes you well-rounded in finance too. So, I would recommend anybody go back and get that at some point in their career. Take some time off, work for a while, and go back. Anybody else want to add anything?
And also get someone else to pay for it. That's another
that's
not going immediately.
That's helpful as well. Okay, question over here. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much for spending your Saturday morning for us. And my name is Ira, I'm a third year at the University of Chicago, and I'm studying economics. I know finance world is such a vast world, and I realize that most of you actually change careers on your way. I was wondering, how did you find your right fit in finance for you?
Good question. Very good question. Anybody want to start? I'll be happy to start because I was an econ major too, and I wasn't really very good at it. It was too theoretical for me.
I'm with you, by the way.
So I couldn't quite grasp it. So, but I did take one class which they don't offer anymore called the Economic Theory of Futures Markets, and back then derivatives were kind of something new, and I got it, and no one else did in the class. And so I thought, well, these guys are all smarter than I am, and they're better in economics, but I get this field, so maybe I should focus my career in that area. So, and that's the truth. It was as simple as that. I found something that I actually enjoyed doing and that I was good at, and then I tried to find a way to use that in a career. So, anybody else?
For me, it was I was doing the psychology side, and then I had this opportunity to trade futures and options that I never heard of. So for me, it was taking a step into something didn't know if I would like, but I had an opportunity. I thought I should try it. And what I learned is I really liked how connected all the markets were, and I really liked how interesting it was. But it was incredibly fast-paced. And what I thought I might like more is more the longer-term strategy. So one thing that I did is interviewed, and I guess it was the senior year, in this case now everyone starts a lot earlier, so junior year, thinking about a lot of different areas. I looked at consulting and other things. And what was interesting is through that process with CAPS, I actually learned that probably investment banking is by talking with a lot of people, I kind of weeded things out. And then what I realized is, wow, there's this whole thing out here called private wealth management where I'm working with individuals and families, but I'm still doing investments, but it's longer term planning. And that seems like it could fit some of the psychology. And so I'm going to give it a shot, and it turned out I fell in love with it literally after that, first year. And so a lot of my friends thought I was crazy because I was still interviewing after having, a couple, some offers and things. And they're like, why are you spending all this time doing that? And I said, because I know if I keep interviewing and know what I don't like, when I'm sitting there working really long hours, I'll know that I've looked at those things. And so I would encourage you to look around.
Good advice. Anybody else? We
Yeah,
have
I mean,
about 5 minutes left. So
Sure. I mean, for me, it was, as I said, my interest was more in the markets. So particularly in the international work that I was doing in the Middle East and Central Asia. And I was working in economic development and thinking, what does that exactly mean, economic development? I think that I was approaching it initially with Save the Children through humanitarian assistance. But after working with some of the microfinance groups, thought that, in fact, economic development, there's definitely a need for humanitarian assistance. And for those of you with interests in NGOs and public policy, I mean, I think that's also very relevant. And there's a lot of overlap with the business world. And in the business side, something that I think I had not previously considered, when I was working in that side, you see the profound impact that it has also on people's lives. And that, essentially humanitarian assistance is good for a temporary relief. But in the end, people need to create sustainable, profitable businesses that help their communities. And there are lots of for-profit business ways to go about doing that, microfinance being one of them.
I guess for me, I've been in so many different industries before my current role, but what I have to say is when I started doing venture capital in Asia after college, I had no idea what venture capital even meant. And then when I went, I realized I really liked it because it was a great way to look at a lot of different companies, meet with management, and not, because I knew that I never just wanted to always sit and run spreadsheets, but it was a way to combine all of those skills. And I feel as though what I'm doing today really allows me to use all the skills and experiences that I've been doing for the last, gazillion years since I graduated from college. So I think a lot of it, and I think it was Jenny who mentioned, it's about figuring out what you don't like to do, and that's why it's really good to do the externships and internships, because it helps you really figure out what you're good at and what you like and what type of environment you want to be in.
Yeah, I'd say I'm not a quant, but sort of fascinated by it, and I was able to combine that with a love of writing, which is something I did have some background in, and as the son of an architect, I always liked looking at the aesthetics of charts. I'm a big fan of Edward Tufte, whose work I think you should probably have a look at, and look at books called things like Lying with Numbers, where you can kind of bring your critical faculties, understanding both language and numbers, and how they can both be informative and deceptive. So I guess I found a career where that kind of interest and skill was valued.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. And I'm going to give it. Sorry. Quickly, the biggest pitfall that you all have found from students going through the career process that are trying to come to you for a job. Quickly, if anybody can think of anything, the biggest pitfall.
You got a bunch. This is what I've seen, and it doesn't seem that you should have to mention that. Don't chew gum at an interview. Wear a suit or appropriate clothing. Don't make any ethnic jokes, remarks, or comments. Avoid the repeated use of I, as if everything you've ever accomplished in your life has been your accomplishment and you never had any help or worked with anybody else. And however you talk by email or text messages or with your friends, remember in a business context, CUL8R is not what you say when someone says your next interview will be at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And that's, so there's, be yourself, but be sort of business-like in a setting.
Grooming is important, just FYI. I think Paul mentioned all the key things, but I think that's, just the appearance, handshake, all of that is important.
Tough crowd. I mean, I think, you guys should do what it is that you really want to do, and don't, say in an interview what you think the person wants to hear, because what the person really wants to hear, frankly, is who you are and what your capabilities are, and just be upfront and honest and as true as you can to that person. And that sounds idealistic, but I really do think that.
No, I think a side note to that is if you don't know an answer, don't pretend like you do. The answer is, I don't know, but I will get back to you, and then actually get back and follow up. I think that's incredible. That definitely will differentiate you. And handwritten thank you notes or thank you note post, any type of interaction you had really is important and goes a long way.
Okay, very good. I'll just make one. I think those are all really excellent points, and I think to sum that up, the key thing is that first impressions are very important. When you're meeting someone, and everybody in a firm that you're wanting to go work for is a member of the team, and you must treat them that way. And they all talk, and they're trying to figure out whether you're going to fit on their team or not. Okay, so first impressions are very important. That means you need to take the time to invest in an outfit that looks presentable, and you need to learn how to do the little things right. Okay, learn how to shake a hand properly, learn how to make eye contact, learn how to say thank you and do things like that. So first impression is very important. I don't hear any sort of roaming around of people. Does that mean we have a little extra time because we started late, or
No, we should.
we can ask one more question? Awesome. Okay. Yes.
It's normally not kosher to talk about compensation when you have a film presentation or get an interview, but what role, if any, did it play when you started off in a career? You didn't know of all the opportunities you had of doing good once you entered the finance field.
So the question is about compensation. You're not supposed to bring it up. That's a good thing. That would be very, very inappropriate if you did ask. But how important was the level of compensation that you...
Was it a factor for your personal choices when you entered the financial sector?
Okay, that's a good question.
I guess what I have learned, because it's part of my work now, is that, well, we'll go a different direction. I guess I wouldn't play the salary game. It's very tempting to, somebody quotes you a good salary, and then you're often locked into that place and that salary and that job for a long time. So I always tried to look at opportunity rather than the specific salary for the position you're taking. Again, if it's a good company, a good culture, you'll probably thrive there. If it's a high salary at a place where people are jerks, you'll have your high salary to hang a hat on, but you'll hate it and hate yourself. Also, I guess as you maybe think forward, I'm now a parent, things like benefits, which aren't always quoted in dollars, are as important as the hard dollar salary. And flexibility for me has always been very important. I work at a place where I can come in early or come in late, or I don't have to account for my hours. I don't have to file every time I want to go on vacation. That's tremendously valuable to me, and I probably could put a dollar value on it, but also think about just how your time is spent or has to be spent, or if somebody's going to be sitting there, if you happen to get in at 9:30 one day, and that could be fine. You might be a very precise person. You might want greater flexibility like what you've had in college, where you have to be at class, but nobody's really making sure you're studying. You don't have study hall. So I'd look at those things as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, compensation also has different forms. I mean, there's compensation with, say, initially security, having security with your compensation, and then there's also participation and upside. So when you look at a position, you might think, okay, is this something where, I'm getting a very good salary today, but there's not much room to participate if the business is successful, or there's taking less compensation in the beginning and making your bet more that the business will do well and you'll do well in that as well. So I would say that you should think about what stage of your life that you're in. If you're young and you want to take a risk, or if you are in a position where you should get decent compensation initially. You should definitely consider those in different ways.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's a trade-off. You can get a higher fixed salary and more variable bonus. And my preference has always been to take the lower fixed salary, figuring I'll make my way and I'll do well enough. And I'd rather have more of the paid discretionary. But I know that some people rather want to know, what's my salary? That's what I want to bank on, and if I get a bonus, great. So a bonus is kind of a bad word, but if you just think of it as a discretionary part of your pay, how much do you want to have depend on your individual fortunes or how the company does, as opposed to, you know, getting a certain paycheck every month that's guaranteed.
Yeah, there's a lot of unhappy people in this world, okay? And a lot of the reason they're unhappy is because their career does not fit their passions, okay? And they make their career choices for things like salaries or prestige. And that might sound good in the short term, but in the long term, you're better off focusing on what you want to do and what skills you want to build and what you want to do with the rest of your life. So now, if you can find a role that satisfies your passions and it makes a lot of money, then awesome, that's good. And if you have two opportunities that are similar, there's no reason that you can't bring salary in at that point. But I think you would all be doing yourself a disservice if you go into finance or choose one firm over another simply because the upfront salary seems attractive. Introductory salary correlation to long-term career success is probably pretty low. I haven't run those numbers, but it's probably pretty low. So keep that in mind. One more? Nope, we're done?
You can do it in 2 minutes.
Any more questions? Okay, yeah.
For anyone on the panel, what do you think your regrets, your career path, or any decisions you've made over the last 10 years?
Anyone? Leaving Goldman Sachs. God, what a great firm.
We're always happy to have you back.
I worked in the suburbs and hated it. I hated commuting, and I never realized how much I hated. That goes to the quality of life. It was good salary, but I sat in a car for 2 hours every day. And if I had to do it again, I'd work downtown for less money.
And the funny thing is, I commute 2 hours each way, and it's been the best thing because that's where, for me, all the help is with my children. So, but I did live in the city initially, and so it's just depending on the stage of life. So I totally,
Right.
yeah, it just it depends on, I think, where you're at.
Anyone?
No regrets.
Just, I would say not realizing the importance of mentors, finding good mentors early on. And now I'm really fortunate that I have that, but I think it's something that you guys should really start thinking about right now, and think about your resident heads, your faculty, I mean, just all the people around you here. So I think it's really important as you think about your life beyond college.
That's a great point.
Get in as much traveling as you can before you take a job. Because you end up working very hard and wanting to spend a lot of time on your career and thinking about some of the things you would have liked to have done before you were working so hard. I think it's a good thing to enjoy your freedom while you have it.
All right, well, I thank all of you for coming out on a Saturday morning. I'd like to thank the panel. I certainly learned a lot from it. I hope you all did too. And good luck on in your work.
Great job.